Welcome to IndyStar's College Basketball Roundup. I am Matt Glenesk. We are joined by IndyStar Butler Insider David Woods, IndyStar IU Insider Zach Osterman, and Lafayette Journal-Courier Purdue Insider Nathan BAIRD. Thank you for joining us, guys.
Thanks.
It seems like only yesterday that Kentucky fans were outside Lucas Oil Stadium selling their title game tickets for $6 to Wisconsin fans, but it is college basketball season, is right around the corner. Practice starts this week for IU Friday, for Purdue Friday as well. So guys, I just wanted to get your thoughts as we get ready for college basketball season. Expectations are high for all three programs. IU is, consistently in the top 15 in preseason polls. Butler and Purdue kind of on the periphery. Probably shouldn't be, I think, and we'll get to that. These are teams that I think most people around here think will do very well this year. So let's just get to a few. We'll go from guy to guy, but we'll start with you, Zach, with IU. And normally we ask, which newcomer is going to make the biggest impact. I think in all of the cases with these three teams, we know who the impact player is going to be. So let's talk about Thomas Bryant, McDonald's All-American. He's a post player. I think everyone knows the main problem with IU last year was their lack of a post presence. How will Thomas Bryant change things for IU this year?
Well, I mean, he's a post player that I think fits Indiana very well. He's athletic, he runs the floor, he's well known for his hustle, his rebounding ability. I don't know that, I don't like to compare players, but if you're talking about kind of the last two Indiana's had, I think he's more well-rounded like Zeller, maybe a little bit less kind of very, very good at one thing like Noah Vonleh was with rebounding the ball and providing that rim protecting presence. But he can shoot a little bit. I think he's going to be very good in the sort of the pick and pop and pick and roll game with Yogi Ferrell. It gives Yogi Ferrell finally again a big man to work with. And I think, as you said, it's also just the presence. It's the idea that this is what Indiana didn't have last year. Now you bring in Thomas Bryant, you also bring in Max Bielfeldt. That front court should not be such an issue, and Indiana should just generally from it be more balanced in lineups, rotations. We shouldn't have to see so many weird kind of junk defenses from Indiana this year. Things will just be more straightforward, and I think that'll be good too.
All right, not to be outdone, Purdue got their own McDonald's All-American big man this year. They got Caleb Swanigan, the first IndyStar Mr. Basketball to go to Purdue since the Big Dog, so it's been a while. So Caleb Swanigan, how will he fit in with A.J. Hammonds, Isaac Hosler? Purdue already has a bevy of front court players. How will he fit in, as a freshman this year?
Well, they're really excited about the way he'll fit in because of the versatility it's going to give this team. Last year they had two big guys, everybody knows that, but they didn't really play big. This year they're actually going to play big. They're going to have Swanigan at the 4. They're going to still have Hammonds and Haas at the 5 doing the things that they've done really well. And they like the things that he does well as a post guy. He's going to still be a rebounding force, still going to be a guy who can score underneath, guy who can defend underneath, but they also like the fact he can shoot a little bit, he can draw guys out, and then is still athletic enough to move by them and get to the basket. It's just going to create a lot of different things that this lineup can do. Last year when they wanted to play a smaller lineup, they had to rely on someone like Vince Edwards or Basil Smotherman to play the 5, and they were really stretched there. Now if they were to have an injury or foul trouble with Haas and Hammonds, they can slide Swanigan over to the 5 and Edwards back to the 4, and it opens things up for him.
Definitely, I think Purdue is probably the deepest of the three teams that we're going to talk about today. Let's talk about Butler. They also have a McDonald's All-American coming in. This one with college experience and including NCAA tournament starting experience. Point guard Tyler Lewis was a transfer from NC State. Alex Barlow graduates, so there's a hole at point guard. What does Tyler Lewis bring to Butler? How important is he going to be to where Butler goes this year?
Well, Tyler Lewis, actually, as far as I know, is the first McDonald's All-American in the history of Butler's basketball program, or since those such ratings were made. He is a conventional point guard. He should make a pretty significant difference in their offense. He's not the defender that Alex Barlow was, but Lewis is, as you said, is a proven player, is a fourth-year player, and the history of Butler basketball has been with the transfers who have had to sit out a year and played with everybody else and then played thereafter have really thrived. Those have been, in fact, I would go so far as to say Butler's all-transfer team may be as good as anyone's in college basketball. So Lewis, I think, will make it a dramatic impact on the Butler's offense, and also kind of allow Butler to almost play through two people. Roosevelt Jones is sometimes a de facto point guard, so this allows them to have two people on the court simultaneously they can run offense through.
Barlow was a leader, obviously an unquestioned leader on that team, also a very good defensive player. Where does Lewis fit in that? He's obviously more of an offensive player. who will have to pick up that leadership role? Is that Roosevelt Jones, Kellen Dunham's job to just, assume being the leader?
Well, I think they'll have multiple leaders. I mean, it's certainly Kellen and Roosevelt Jones, but I think Tyler Lewis, by his position and the fact that he's a fourth-year player, and he's really his second year in the program. He had to sit out last year, but he practiced with them every day. So, Butler really has a lot of experience. So 4 of their 5 starters will be really third-year or fourth-year or fifth-year players. You don't see that much in college basketball anymore. So it'll be a pretty veteran group that the Bulldogs throw out there.
Zach, let's talk about IU. It seems like every year we talk the same thing, off-season turmoil, whether it's Tom Green's job security or players getting in trouble off the court. We've had, 4 players kicked off? Well, Devin Davis kicked off the team, Heiner Mosquera-Pereira kicked off the team, Emmett Holt kicked off the team, all since they last played. So then you've got also Thomas Bryant, a freshman who we've talked about, the All-American, who a lot is, entrusted upon. He gets in trouble before fall classes even start. So is there concern that maybe some of this off-the-court issues might derail what looks to be a really good season that it could be with high expectations?
I think absolutely, and I think the concern is, obviously, you wonder just with the pattern of behavior if there are going to be more incidents, and it's kind of one of those things where I think as much as Indiana fans and coaches hope that it's been stamped out, there have been too many to say there never will be another one again. But you also wonder if these issues are, I guess, systemic within kind of guys not being able to, the words we've heard from Tom Crean are responsibility and accountability, things like that. Do we see that on the court as well? Do we see that affect maybe the way, not that, I think this is a team that is close in terms of good chemistry in the locker room. I think Tom Crean has even said they're almost too good of friends. That there's not enough willingness to kind of step up and police one another a little bit at times. Does that bleed over onto the court somehow? Does that bleed over in terms of maybe just a lack of sharpness or whatever you want to say? And I don't know. We might find out at the same time at some level. This has been maybe as authoritative of an offseason, dismissing 3 players, and none of them, I think, for obviously all for run-ins with the law, but you would argue none of them for incidents that maybe were as serious as some of the ones that came previously. Maybe the message has finally gotten through, and maybe that sort of toughens things up within the locker room, and then it does maybe go back onto the court, bleed back onto the court in a positive way. But I don't think there's any doubt that that fans are concerned, and probably just sort of ongoing concerns, really, because this is something that just Indiana can't seem to stamp out.
We talked about leaders with Butler. Yogi Ferrell is a senior point guard. He's done pretty much everything you can do as a college player, besides obviously win a national championship, but he's been in the NCAA tournament. His point totals are high, his assist totals are high, ranked within the top 10 of IU. Is it up to him to be that leader, to be the guy who polices this team?
I think it needs to be him first. I don't think it's him only. Obviously, you have Nick Zeisloft, who one of the big advantages of taking him as a transfer last year was that he was a 2-year graduate transfer. You weren't going to just kind of get a 1-year rental. He was going to have the full off season and really, you hope anyway, kind of establish himself as that veteran presence as well. Max Bielfeldt is a player that everyone's spoken highly of in terms of his locker room presence, his practice court presence since he came in, much less his Big Ten experience, obviously. But I think it absolutely needs to start with Yogi Ferrell, because the reality is, if you look at the statistics, there's going to be an argument at the end of this year for Yogi Ferrell as the best statistical point guard in Indiana history. Maybe not the best ever to play there. That's big company, Thomas. Quinn Buckner, Isaiah Thomas, whomever. But in terms of stats, he's on pace to come very close to, if not set, Indiana's career assist record.
Now, while IU had a rocky offseason, Purdue's offseason, you could say, was the total opposite. It was a really good one. Not only did you land Caleb Swanigan, but he plays with Team USA. Vince Edwards gets the opportunity to practice with Team USA in a tryout. So they're getting better. The one issue with Purdue, though, and it was the issue that was kind of going into last season, the same issue, point guard play. They took a grad transfer, John Octius, last year, who I think exceeded most people's expectations, was exactly what Purdue needed. Now they have to do it again. Johnny Hill from Texas Arlington. What can Purdue expect from Johnny Hill? And if he isn't, John Octius, what do they do to work around that point guard situation? Because everyone knows they're going to dominate in the paint.
Well, I think it's asking a lot to ask him to be John Octius again. I thought John Octius had one of the maybe overlooked seasons in college basketball last year, because Purdue doesn't make the NCAA tournament if John Octius doesn't fall in their laps. And he came in as a guy with he had NCAA tournament experience, which Johnny Hill doesn't have. He came in playing at really a higher level of basketball at Colorado State than Johnny Hill had, arguably. And he came in as a low assist but also low turnover guy, and that's actually an issue that Johnny Hill has had in the past. So it would be interesting to see how Johnny Hill kind of works on some of those things and fits into this system. At the same time, at this point last year, John Octius may still not have even been on campus. It was practice had already started, and they get John Octius. Now they've had Johnny Hill for a couple of months now, and he's really become a part of the team. He's worked himself into what they're doing offensively. He's learned these defensive principles, which is a big deal at Purdue, as everyone knows. And I think that's really going to make a difference. He's coming in. They took them a while to trust Johnny Hill. Even took Matt Painter a while to trust Johnny Hill to the point where he was going to, John Octius to the point where he was going to play 30-plus minutes a game. I think there's maybe going to be more of a trust factor built up early on with Johnny Hill, which can help him.
Now, if Johnny Hill doesn't do these things that Purdue fans hope, what would be the backup plan at point guard? I mean, you have P.J. Thompson from Buff here in Indianapolis, freshman Grant Weatherford from Hamilton Heights, and then Raphael Davis maybe could possibly slide to the one.
Well, Raphael has talked about one of his big goals in the offseason was to just do more ball handling work, and it wasn't necessarily to eventually play a lot of time at the one, but it was just to be a more complete guard. That's the way he talks about it. Just another step, and he's just a guy that works really hard as it is, and we saw that with the transformation he has made as a defensive player in his career. So I think he potentially can help them there. Even someone like Dakota Mathias, if you just need someone to bring up the ball, it's a non-press situation, just someone to kind of bring the ball up, because Purdue running the motion offense, it's not like the one is the one that's making all those plays as in the half court necessarily. So, but I do think they're excited about what P.J. Thompson's done. He's another guy that had some offseason experience going to China for a couple weeks and just kind of getting a new perspective on basketball, new perspective on a lot of things. He's got a year under his belt. They think he can be more of a contributor this year, but I think it will be behind Hill, but it does give them, I think, someone that they think is going to be a solid option there.
All right, David, back to Butler. Now, I don't think there was a more surprising team last year than Butler. You look at the year before, they struggled in their first season in the Big East really badly. Brandon Miller then in the offseason, right before practice starts, takes a leave of absence from the team. There's a lot of uncertainty around the program. Chris Holtman takes over. And then I think they must have exceeded everyone's expectations. They finished tied for second in the Big East. They win, 23, 24 games, make the NCAA tournament, gave Notre Dame a heck of a game in the NCAA tournament. So how does Chris Holtman, how does he build off that season? And we've talked about, kind of improved depth, which was the problem last year, was that they really only went 5 deep, 6 deep at most. So how does Chris Holtman build off last year's success?
Well, that's a good question. He's probably done the worst thing a college basketball coach could do, and that's to raise people's expectations, because Butler certainly has done that with this group. Probably the key to their whole season really will be maintaining close to the defensive efficiency they had last year, because last year Butler was one of the 10 best teams in the country on points per possession, which I think is a really good barometer of how good their defense is, and while bringing their offense forward. And they also were very successful winning a lot of close games down the stretch. Whether it was Roosevelt Jones making a big shot, or Alex Barlow making a steal, or Kellen Dunham making a key three, they were really good in a lot of those tight situations. In fact, I think they were only 6-3 at home, but they were 12-6, which means they were 6-3 in Big East road games. And just any power conference in the country, if you're 6-3 on the road, that's a heck of a job.
It shows you that you have a tough team. And I mean, with Roosevelt Jones, Dunham, and you mentioned Barlow. I mean, Butler was very, very tough last year. I'm going to ask you all the same questions, so we'll start with you, Nathan. If you had to pick one potential pitfall we've talked about the point guard play, and that might be your answer, but one potential pitfall for Purdue this season.
Well, you'd like to maybe say something like injuries, but I think this team is going to be pretty deep this year. And I think the floor is really high on this team. I would say maybe the one thing that they have to do better this year is shoot the ball. This is a team that's going to get zoned a lot. They were really disappointed with the way they shot the ball last year and thought it was kind of an anomaly. I mean, they were 12th in the Big Ten. I think they shot 32% from three-point range. But with the teams that are going to come out and try to zone them as we talked about with all the big guys they have underneath, they've got to have guys like Kendall Stevens and Dakota Mathias and Edwards and some of these other guys step up and hit threes better than they did last year. And there's every reason to believe they will do that, because historically those guys have all been good three-point shooters. And if that clicks in, if you start to get up to where the teams in the top third of the conference were last year, 38%, somewhere around there, this, I think, it becomes a more dangerous team offensively.
Okay, Zach, same question. What is one roadblock that could trip up the Hoosiers this season?
Well, David talked about points per possession allowed for Butler. Indiana was the only team in the Big Ten outside the top 200 in that statistic last year. They were, by basically any measure, the Big Ten's worst defensive team. I think the big question for Indiana is, and we should find out fairly quickly this season, how much of that was down to individual issues and guys really needing to get better individually defensively? How much of that was down to being a little bit younger? They're going to be a lot more experienced this year than they were last year, and all the things that come in not being able to communicate well, not being able to read coverage well and adjust sort of possession to possession the way you need to. And how much of that just comes down to how weird they had to be with some of their defenses and some of their game plans without that post presence, that consistent presence inside that they should have this year. If it's simpler for Indiana defensively this year, are they going to be a lot better? There's really not like one player right now that I would build the way you could Victor Oladipo and to a certain extent Will Sheehy, a defense around on this team. But as a unit, they can get better if they just get simpler. I think the question is how much better, because ultimately, I mean, they were so far off the pace last year. If memory serves, they were also the worst defense to make the NCAA tournament as well. And that's that. You've got the tools to do it now. That has to change this year.
All right, David, what will trip up Butler? What is the one thing that worries you the most about this Butler Bulldogs team?
Well, it's sustaining the traditional Butler strength, which has been its defense, and in addition to that, and part of defense is defensive rebounding, and Cameron Woods was really an elite college rebounder, and losing him and Barlow simultaneously, those are two very big pieces of Butler's defense, so that is my main concern about them this season.
Okay, we've got the Crossroad Classics. Obviously, that comes here later in the year at Bankers Life Fieldhouse. And a lot of people like to talk about who's the best team in the state when that showcase comes around. I can't forget about Notre Dame, who are in a lot of people's top 25s as well. So finish this sentence. We'll start with you, Nathan. Purdue is the best team in the state if
they beat IU on the road and they beat Butler in the Crossroads Classic. I mean, they get to play both of them, and neither one of them are at home. So for them, the equation's kind of easy. If they can just win both of those two games, I think the argument's pretty strong. In the grander scheme, last year the only real signature road win that Purdue had was going on the road and beating IU, which was a team that did not match up well with it at all. So can Purdue go on the road and start beating those other teams at the top of the Big Ten? If they can do that, I think they take that next step.
Okay, Zach, IU is the best team in the state if?
I mean, it starts with the defense. I think if Thomas Bryant is as advertised, he doesn't need to have a Cody Zeller-like freshman year, but he needs to fit in well early, give Indiana that presence at both ends of the floor. I would say on a scaled-down version, the same thing for Max Bielfeldt. And then the one other thing I'd throw out is if you can get the guard rotations right, because as guard-heavy as Indiana was last year, there are 4 players on this roster that are listed, 4 scholarship players listed as guards. I think you're going to see more of Troy Williams handling the ball, maybe even a little bit of Colin Hartman. Not a lot, but I think he could kind of in spots and situations, because he's smart enough and experienced enough, get you moving in certain ways. Because Indiana just can't be so reliant on those 3 guards, Farrell, Blackman, and Johnson this year. There's just not a lot behind them. I think they probably all still start, but it wouldn't shock me if you see the balance of minutes maybe equalize just a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised too if Indiana goes bigger, because Indiana can, and I think that suddenly ties back into your defense. Those are the 3 things that I would throw out.
All right, David, same question to you.
I think for Butler is it can be the best team in the state if its offensive gains are significantly greater than almost an inevitable slight slippage in defense, and also if they can keep creating Butler magic and winning those close games down the stretch as their good teams always have done.
Do you have Butler competing for the Big East title this year?
I sure think they can. I don't think there's like a surefire, there's no way any team in the Big East can beat this team. But at the same token, it's still a little bit of a fragile mix, because it's not a real big team, and the Big East is a very physically challenging lead, and Butler does not have a lot of size outside of 6'10" freshman Nate Fowler.
Okay, and as far as the Big Ten, I think most people think that Maryland is the class of the Big Ten this year. A lot of people have them ranked, 2 or 3 in their preseason polls. And a lot of people have IU and Purdue kind of as the second tier, maybe IU at a second tier, the top of the second tier, Purdue a little bit lower, though I think we all agree that Purdue is right there with IU. Do you think IU can contend for the Big Ten title?
Yes, absolutely. I think that again, not to hammer on a dead horse, but the defense has to make a really big step forward. But I have questions even. I'm going to vote Maryland my preseason Big Ten favorite. I still have questions about Maryland, though. You talk about a team that won a lot of close games last year. If you want to talk about the luck factor a little bit, Maryland's got some proving to do that without Des Wells, even bringing in Diamond Stone, even getting Melo Trimble a year older, it can win a lot of those close games that it was pulling out last season. I think Purdue will be in it. I think Michigan State will be in it. I think IU will be in it. I would not be shocked at all if Maryland's visit to Bloomington has some kind of Big Ten title implication on the last weekend of the regular season in March.
Okay, Nathan, can Purdue win the Big Ten title?
Well, very similar to what you're asking about being the best team in the state. They play Maryland twice, and that gives them 2 shots at knocking them off and taking that. But yeah, I think that Purdue should be absolutely in the mix for a top, right back where they were last year, a top 3 type finish in the Big Ten. They've just got so much depth. They've got experience for the first time in a few years now, and they've got talent. I think they should be contending.
I think I just think there is a significant gap between 1, 2, 3, 4 in the Big Ten and everybody else right now. I mean, the traditional Wisconsin has lost a lot. Michigan had a bad year last year. Ohio State is going to be very, very young. So I think right now it's hard for me to put anybody else in that group with Maryland, IU, Purdue, Michigan State.
All right. Well, guys, we appreciate you taking the time. I can't believe it's college basketball season already. The first games are in first week of November. Is that correct? I got that right? Second week of November. See, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm so excited.
42 days from your first practice.
Awesome. 42 days from your first practice. Practice starts Friday for IU and Purdue. When does practice start for Butler?
Tuesday.
So they got a little more time. So, guys, appreciate it. He is Nathan BAIRD of the Lafayette Journal and Courier. He is Zach Osterman of the IndyStar. And this is David Woods. I am Matt Glenesk. And thanks for joining us for the IndyStar College Basketball Roundtable.